The blood on Willa Laurent's hands had long since washed away, but the stain on her soul felt permanent as she stumbled into Circleville, Utah, on a scorching afternoon in July of 1883. She had been riding for 3 days straight, her horse barely able to carry her weight anymore, and when she finally dismounted in front of the general store, her legs nearly gave out beneath her. The town was small, dusty, and looked like the kind of place where people minded their own business, which was exactly what she needed. She tied her horse to the hitching post with trembling fingers, noticing how several townspeople glanced her way before quickly averting their eyes. She must have looked like hell itself had spit her out. Inside the store, the cooler air provided momentary relief from the relentless heat. An elderly woman behind the counter watched her with cautious eyes as Willa gathered supplies with what little money she had left. Jerky, hardtack, a canteen to replace the one that had cracked somewhere between here and the Nevada border. She kept her head down, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face, hiding the hollowness in her cheeks and the shadows under her green eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and endless guilt. "That will be $2.15, the woman said, her voice neutral but not unkind. Willa counted out the coins with shaking hands, aware that this left her with barely enough for another meal. She would have to figure something out, find work somewhere, though who would hire someone who looked as haunted as she felt was anyone's guess. "You look like you could use a hot meal," the woman observed, softening slightly. "The boarding house down the street serves supper at 6. "Thank you," Willa managed, her voice hoarse from disuse. She had barely spoken to anyone in days. She gathered her supplies and headed back outside, where the late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Her horse needed water and rest, and so did she, but the boarding house meant people, questions, conversations she was not ready to have. She led her mare to the trough near the livery stable instead, watching as the animal drank deeply. A tall figure emerged from the stable's shadowed interior, and Willa instinctively stepped back, her hand moving toward the knife at her belt. "Easy there," the man said, raising both hands in a peaceful gesture. "Did not mean to startle you. Name's Wade Brennan. I run this place." Willa studied him warily. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the edges beneath his worn hat. His blue eyes were remarkably kind, which somehow made her more uncomfortable than if they had been cold. She did not deserve kindness, not after what she had done. "Your horse needs tending," Wade continued, moving closer to examine the mare. "She's favoring her front left leg." "How far have you ridden her?" "Far enough," Willa said shortly, not wanting to provide details. Wade ran a practiced hand down the horse's leg, his touch gentle. "She's got some swelling here. Needs rest, cold compresses, and proper feed. I can stable her for 50 cents a night. Includes care and feed." Willa did the mental calculation and felt her stomach sink. She had enough for maybe 3 nights, 4 if she did not eat. After that, she would be completely broke in a town where she knew no one, with a past that would damn her if anyone discovered it. "I can pay for 2 nights, she said finally. "After that, maybe we can work something out. I can muck stalls, haul feed, whatever you need." Wade tilted his head, studying her with an expression she could not quite read. "You running from something?" "That is none of your concern," Willa said, more sharply than she intended. "Fair enough," Wade replied easily. "But if you are looking for work, I could use an extra hand around here. My usual helper broke his arm last week, and I am drowning in work. Room and board included, plus a small wage. Nothing fancy, but honest work." Willa stared at him, waiting for the catch, for the moment when his kindness would reveal itself as something else entirely. She had learned the hard way that nothing came without a price, especially not from men who looked at desperate women with supposedly kind eyes. "Why would you offer that to a complete stranger?" she asked suspiciously. Wade shrugged, taking off his hat and running a hand through his hair. "Because you look like you need help and I need help. Seems like a straightforward arrangement to me. You are free to say no if it does not suit you." "I do not deserve your kindness," Willa said before she could stop herself, the words bitter on her tongue. Wade replaced his hat and met her eyes directly. "Everyone deserves another chance. Whatever you are running from, whatever you have done, that is your business. I am just offering you work and a place to stay while you figure things out. Yes or no?" The sincerity in his voice nearly undid her. Willa felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She did not cry, not anymore. She had used up all her tears in the days after it happened, when the reality of what she had done finally crashed down on her like a rock slide. "Yes," she whispered, because she had no other choice and because somewhere deep inside, beneath all the guilt and self-loathing, a tiny part of her still wanted to survive. "Good," Wade said, offering a small smile. "Let me get your horse settled and I will show you where you will be staying. There is a small room attached to the stable. Nothing fancy, but it is clean and private. You can clean up and rest. Then we will talk about work arrangements over supper." Willa nodded numbly and handed over her horse's reins, watching as Wade led the mare into the stable with practiced ease. She followed slowly, her supplies clutched to her chest like a shield. The stable was well maintained, clean and organized in a way that spoke of someone who took pride in his work. Several horses occupied the stalls, and they all looked healthy and well cared for. At the far end, Wade pushed open a door to reveal a small room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that let in the late afternoon light. "Pump is outside for water," Wade said, setting her saddlebags on the bed. "Outhouse is behind the building. I will be finishing up some work for the next hour or so, then we can head to the boarding house for supper." "That work for you?" "I can make my own supper," Willa said quickly. The thought of sitting in a room full of strangers, trying to make small talk and avoid questions, filled her with dread. "Suit yourself," Wade replied. "But the offer stands if you change your mind. I eat there most nights since I cannot cook worth a damn." After he left, Willa collapsed onto the bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. She had expected to drift through Circleville, rest for a day or two, then move on before anyone could ask too many questions. Instead, she had somehow acquired a job and a place to stay from a stranger who claimed everyone deserved another chance. The irony was not lost on her. If Wade knew what she had done, he would not be so quick to offer his help. She closed her eyes and saw it all again. The ranch house in Nevada, flames licking up the walls. Her stepfather's face, twisted with rage as he came at her mother with the same brutality he had shown for years. The gun in Willa's hands, heavy and terrible. The deafening crack of the shot. Her stepfather crumpling to the floor, blood spreading across the wooden planks. Her mother's screams. The moment Willa realized she had become a killer, she had not meant to do it, or maybe she had. She had grabbed the gun to stop him, to finally end the years of abuse and terror, but in that split second, her finger had squeezed the trigger before she could think it through. Self-defense, her mind whispered. Murder, her conscience screamed back. The law would likely see it as justifiable, but her mother's horrified expression told a different story. In saving her mother, she had destroyed whatever fragile relationship they had left, so Willa had run. Taken her horse, what supplies she could grab, and fled into the night while her mother sobbed over the body of the man who had made their lives hell for 5 long years. She had not looked back, had not stopped except to rest her horse, had not allowed herself to think about anything except putting distance between herself and that burning house, that dead man, that life she could never return to. A knock on the door jolted her back to the present. Wade's voice came through the wood. "Just wanted to let you know I am heading to supper. There is some bread and cheese in the stable office if you get hungry. See you in the morning and we will go over what needs doing." "Thank you," Willa called back, her voice steadier than she felt. She waited until she heard his footsteps fade before venturing out to find the food he had mentioned. The bread was fresh, the cheese sharp and satisfying, and she ate standing in the stable office, surrounded by the comfortable sounds of horses settling in for the night. It was peaceful here, she realized. Safe. The knot of tension in her shoulders eased slightly, though the guilt remained a constant weight in her chest. That night, she dreamed of fire and blood and woke gasping in the darkness, unsure for a moment where she was. The unfamiliar room gradually came into focus, and she remembered. Circleville, the stable, Wade Brennan and his inexplicable kindness. She lay awake until dawn, listening to the horses stirring in their stalls, and wondered how long she could keep running from herself. Wade appeared at her door just after sunrise, looking far too cheerful for the early hour. "Morning. Hope you slept well. Ready to get to work?" Willa had barely slept at all, but she nodded and followed him out into the cool morning air. The work was physical and demanding, exactly what she needed to keep her mind occupied. Wade showed her how he liked things organized, which horses needed special care, and the routine for feeding, watering, and mucking out the stalls. He was patient with his explanations, never making her feel stupid when she asked questions, and he worked alongside her rather than standing back and watching. By midday, Willa was covered in dust and sweat, her muscles aching pleasantly from honest labor. Wade brought out a bucket of water and 2 tin cups, handing her one as they sat in the shade of the stable. "You are a hard worker," he observed, taking a long drink. "Most people need more breaks their first day." "I am used to hard work," Willa replied, which was true. The ranch in Nevada had demanded constant labor, though her stepfather had usually found fault with everything she did, no matter how well she performed. "Where did you work before?" Wade asked casually. Willa stiffened. "Here and there. Ranches, mostly." Wade nodded, not pressing for details. "Well, you have good instincts with horses. They trust you, which is not always easy to earn." It was perhaps the nicest compliment anyone had given her in years, and Willa felt an uncomfortable warmth in her chest. She did not deserve his approval, his trust, his kindness. She was a murderer, running from justice, and every moment she spent here was built on lies and omissions. "I should get back to work," she said, standing abruptly. Over the following days, they fell into an easy rhythm. Wade was easy company, filling the silence with stories about the town, the horses, and his own history. He had inherited the stable from his father 2 years ago, he told her, and had been working to build it into something more than just a place to board horses. He dreamed of breeding quality stock, of establishing a reputation throughout Utah for reliable, well-trained animals. Willa found herself listening more than she intended, drawn in by his genuine enthusiasm and the glimpses of the person beneath the cowboy exterior. Wade was smart, she realized, with a head for business and an impressive knowledge of horses that went beyond basic care. He was also kind, not just to her, but to everyone who came through the stable. He knew the townspeople by name, asked after their families, and always had time for a friendly word. She tried to keep her distance emotionally, reminding herself that this was temporary, that she would need to move on eventually. But as the days turned into weeks, Circleville began to feel less like a hiding place and more like something dangerously close to home. She learned the rhythms of the town, the faces of the regular customers, and the routines that marked each day. Wade paid her fairly, and she began to save what little she could, though she was no longer certain what she was saving for. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Wade invited her to join him for supper at the boarding house. Willa had continued to decline his previous invitations, preferring to eat alone in her room or in the stable office, but something in his expression made her hesitate. "It would be good for you to meet some folks," Wade said gently. "You cannot hide in the stable forever, Willa." The sound of her name on his lips sent a small shiver through her. She had been careful not to give him her last name, introducing herself simply as Willa, but he had never pushed for more information. "I am not hiding," she lied. Wade gave her a look that said he saw right through her but was too polite to call her on it. "Either way, dinner is at 6. I would like it if you came." So she did, changing into her least dusty dress and attempting to tame her hair into something presentable. The boarding house dining room was warm and loud, filled with the sounds of conversation and laughter. Wade introduced her to the other diners, his hand resting briefly on her back in a gesture that felt protective rather than possessive. Everyone was friendly, asking the usual questions about where she was from and how she liked Circleville, and Willa deflected with vague answers that seemed to satisfy them. The food was excellent, and Willa found herself actually enjoying the meal despite her initial reluctance. Wade kept the conversation flowing easily, and she noticed how he subtly steered people away from topics that made her uncomfortable. He was being protective of her, she realized, and the thought made her chest tighten with an emotion she did not want to examine too closely. After dinner, they walked back to the stable under a sky full of stars. The night air was cool and pleasant after the heat of the day, and Willa found herself walking slower than necessary, reluctant to end the evening. "Thank you for inviting me," she said quietly. "I had a nice time." "I am glad," Wade replied, his voice warm. "You should smile more often. It suits you." Willa touched her face, surprised. She had not even realized she had been smiling. "I do not have much to smile about." Wade stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Willa, I do not know what happened to you before you came here, and I will not pry. But whatever it was, you do not have to carry it alone. Sometimes talking about things helps. And sometimes talking about things makes them more real," Willa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes the only way to survive is to keep moving forward and not look back." "That is not surviving," Wade said gently. "That is just existing. There is a difference." His words hit too close to home, and Willa felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. "You do not understand. I have done things that cannot be forgiven. I do not deserve kindness. I do not deserve a second chance, and I certainly do not deserve whatever it is you are offering me." "Everyone deserves another chance," Wade said firmly. "I told you that the day we met, and I meant it. Whatever you have done, whatever mistakes you have made, they do not define who you are or who you can become." "You do not know what you are saying," Willa said, tears burning in her eyes. "If you knew the truth about me, you would not be standing here saying these things." Wade reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently cupped her face in his calloused hands. "Then tell me the truth and let me decide for myself." Willa stood frozen, trapped between the desire to confess everything and the fear of seeing disgust replace the kindness in his eyes. In the end, fear won. She pulled away from his touch, wrapping her arms around herself. "I cannot," she whispered. "I am sorry, Wade, I just cannot." She turned and fled to her room, closing the door behind her and leaning against it as silent tears finally broke free. She heard Wade's footsteps outside, heard him pause, then continue on to his own residence behind the stable. She had hurt him by pulling away, she knew, but it was better this way. Better that he think her damaged or difficult than discover the truth about what she had done. The next morning, Wade was his usual cheerful self, making no mention of the previous night's conversation. Willa was grateful for his tact, and they worked side by side in comfortable silence, the awkwardness gradually fading as the day progressed. But something had shifted between them, a new awareness that made her pulse quicken when their hands accidentally brushed, that made her hyper-conscious of his presence in a way she had not been before. She tried to deny it, tried to convince herself that what she felt was simple gratitude for his kindness, but her heart knew better. She was falling for Wade Brennan, and it was the worst possible thing that could happen. She had no right to feel this way, no right to want something she could never have. Her future was uncertain at best, criminal at worst, and allowing herself to care about Wade would only end in heartbreak for both of them. But the heart, Willa discovered, did not listen to reason. As summer deepened into August, her feelings only grew stronger. She learned to read Wade's moods, to anticipate his needs, to work in harmony with him in the way that comes only from spending hours together day after day. She learned that he liked his coffee black and strong, that he hummed when he was concentrating, and that he had a soft spot for the old mare in the corner stall who had belonged to his father. She also learned that Wade was courting her, in his own quiet way. He brought her wildflowers he found on his morning rides. He made sure she ate properly and rested when the work was particularly heavy. He included her in conversations with customers, trusting her judgment on horse care and training. He made her feel valued, respected, and cared for in ways she had never experienced before. And with each kindness, each gentle gesture, the guilt inside her grew heavier. How could she accept his affection under false pretenses? How could she let him care for someone who was living a lie? The crisis came in early September, when a marshal rode into town asking questions about a woman matching Willa's description. She was in the stable office when she overheard Wade talking to him, her blood turning to ice as she caught fragments of the conversation. Wanted for questioning in relation to a death in Nevada, the marshal was saying. Woman in her early 20s, dark hair, green eyes, might be traveling alone. Goes by the name Willa Laurent. Willa's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. They knew her name. They were looking for her. It was over. Cannot say I have seen anyone matching that description, Wade replied calmly, but I will keep an eye out and let you know if anyone like that comes through. Appreciate it, the marshal said. Crime happened about 2 months back. Fellow named Henry Custer, shot in his own home. The woman is his stepdaughter, and she disappeared the same night. Mother says it was an accident, that the girl was trying to protect her, but the law still needs to question her. Willa's vision blurred with tears. Her mother had tried to protect her, had claimed it was an accident. But that did not change what she had done, did not erase the blood on her hands or the life she had taken. After the marshal left, Willa remained hidden in the office, her mind racing. She needed to run again, needed to pack her few belongings and disappear before Wade connected the dots. She should have left weeks ago, before she let herself get comfortable, before she let herself care. But when she finally emerged from the office, Wade was waiting for her, leaning against the stable wall with his arms crossed over his chest. His expression was unreadable. "How much did you hear?" he asked quietly. "Enough," Willa said, her voice shaking. "I will pack my things and be gone within the hour. Thank you for everything you have done for me. I am sorry for bringing trouble to your door." "So it is true then," Wade said. "You are Willa Laurent. You are the woman the marshal is looking for." Willa nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Did you kill your stepfather, The blunt question forced her to meet his eyes. Yes, he was beating my mother again, and I grabbed the gun to make him stop. I did not mean to pull the trigger, but I did. I killed him and then I ran. Why did you run if it was self-defense? Because I was not sure it was, Willa said, the words tumbling out in a rush. Because part of me wanted to kill him, Wade. Part of me was glad when I saw him fall, glad that he could never hurt us again. What kind of person feels glad about taking a life? What kind of person runs instead of staying to face the consequences? Wade pushed off from the wall and walked toward her slowly. The kind of person who has been hurt and scared for too long. The kind of person who did what she had to do to survive and protect someone she loved. You are not a monster, Willa. You are a victim who fought back. You heard the marshal, Willa said desperately. They are looking for me. If I stay, I will bring trouble down on you, on this whole town. I have to go. Or you could stay and face it, Wade said, stopping in front of her. Your mother told them it was an accident. That means she is willing to testify on your behalf. With her statement and the history of abuse, any decent judge would see it was justifiable. You could clear your name, Willa. You could stop running. I cannot, Willa whispered. I am too afraid. Wade reached out and took her hands in his grip warm and solid. Then let me be afraid with you. Let me help you through this. You do not have to do it alone. Willa stared at him through her tears, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Why would you do that? Why would you risk everything for someone like me? Because I love you, Wade said simply. I have loved you since the day you walked into my stable looking like you were barely holding yourself together, but too stubborn to give up. I love your strength, your dedication, your kind heart that you try so hard to hide. And I believe in second chances, remember? Let me help you get yours. The words broke something open inside her, and suddenly, Willa was sobbing, all the pain and fear and guilt she had been carrying finally pouring out. Wade pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she cried into his chest, his hands stroking her hair in soothing motions. I love you too, she choked out between sobs. I did not want to, I tried not to, but I do. I love you so much, and I am so sorry for lying to you. You did not lie, Wade said gently. You just did not tell me everything, and I understand why, but no more secrets, Willa. If we are going to do this, we do it together, all of it. The good and the bad. Willa pulled back slightly to look up at him. You really think I could clear my name? I think it is worth trying, Wade said, brushing tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. And I think you are worth fighting for. We will get you a good lawyer. We will contact your mother to come testify, and we will present the truth. Whatever happens, I will be right there beside you. The hope that bloomed in Willa's chest was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. For the first time since that terrible night, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond running and hiding. A future where she could stay in Circleville, could build a life here with Wade, could finally lay down the burden of guilt she had been carrying. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Let us try. Wade's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, bright and warm and full of promise. He leaned down and kissed her gently, and Willa felt the last of her walls crumble away. She kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into that moment, all her fear and hope and desperate love. When they finally pulled apart, Wade rested his forehead against hers. We will get through this together. I promise you that. The next few weeks were the hardest of Willa's life. Wade hired a lawyer from Salt Lake City, a sharp-minded man named Thomas Fletcher who specialized in defense cases. Fletcher listened to Willa's story without judgment, taking careful notes and asking pointed questions about the history of abuse, the events of that night, and her mother's likely testimony. This is a strong case for self-defense, Fletcher said after hearing everything. Especially with your mother's cooperation. The fact that you ran will complicate things slightly, but we can argue emotional distress and fear. The important thing is that you are willing to face the charges now. What are the chances she will be acquitted?" Wade asked, his hand holding Willa's tightly. "Good," Fletcher replied. "Not guaranteed, but good. Juries generally sympathize with victims of domestic violence who fight back, especially women protecting their mothers. We will need character witnesses from here as well, people who can speak to Willa's nature and behavior since arriving in Circleville." Wade immediately offered himself, along with several townspeople who had come to know and like Willa over the summer. The boarding house owner, the general store clerk, and even the local minister all agreed to testify to her good character. Their support brought fresh tears to Willa's eyes, proof that she had built something real in this town, connections that mattered. The hardest part was contacting her mother. Willa wrote a letter with shaking hands, explaining where she was and that she was ready to face what she had done. She asked for her mother's forgiveness and for her help in presenting the truth to the court. Sending that letter felt like ripping open an old wound, exposing all the pain she had tried to bury. The response came 2 weeks later, and Willa nearly could not bring herself to open it. Wade sat beside her, his presence a silent source of strength, as she finally broke the seal and unfolded the pages. Her mother's handwriting was familiar, the loops and curves bringing back memories of better times before Henry Custer had entered their lives. The letter was long, filled with apologies and explanations and declarations of love that made Willa's heart ache. "My dearest Willa," it began, "I have been praying for word from you every day since you left, terrified that something terrible had happened to you. When the marshal told me a letter had come from Utah, I wept with relief to know you are safe. I need you to understand that what happened that night was not your fault. Henry was a cruel man, made crueler by drink, and he had been getting worse for months. I should have left him years ago, should have protected you better, but I was too afraid and too ashamed to admit I had made such a terrible mistake in marrying him. When you pulled that trigger, you saved my life. I have no doubt that if you had not acted, Henry would have killed me that night. The law may call it killing, but I call it salvation. You are not a murderer, my darling girl. You are my hero, and I will tell that to any judge or jury who will listen. I am leaving Nevada within the week and will come to Circleville as soon as I can arrange travel. We will face this together, and when it is over, perhaps we can finally have the peaceful life we both deserve. I love you more than words can say, and I am so very proud of the strong, brave woman you have become. Your loving mother, Margaret." By the time Willa finished reading, tears were streaming down her face, but for the first time, they were tears of relief rather than guilt. Her mother did not hate her. Her mother did not blame her. Her mother was coming to help make this right. Wade pulled her close and she buried her face in his shoulder, letting the emotions wash over her. "She is coming," Willa managed through her tears. "She is going to testify for me." "I knew she would," Wade said softly. "Mothers do not stop loving their children no matter what happens." Margaret Laurent arrived in Circleville 3 weeks later, looking older and more tired than Willa remembered, but her smile upon seeing her daughter was radiant. They embraced on the train platform, both crying, both holding on as if afraid to let go. "Let me look at you," Margaret said, pulling back to study Willa's face. "You look good, sweetheart, healthy. This place has been good to you." "It has," Willa agreed, glancing at Wade, who had accompanied her to the station. "Mama, this is Wade Brennan. He has been helping me since I arrived." Margaret's eyes sharpened with understanding as she looked between them, noting their clasped hands and the way they stood close together. "Helping you, I see. Well, Mr. Brennan, I want to thank you for taking care of my daughter when I could not. "It has been my honor, Mrs. Laurent," Wade replied respectfully. "Willa is a remarkable woman, and I am grateful she found her way here." Margaret smiled, and some of the weariness left her face. "I can see she is in good hands. Now, when do I meet this lawyer, and what do we need to do to make this nightmare end?" The trial was set for early November in the county seat, giving Fletcher time to prepare a solid defense. Those weeks of waiting were torture for Willa, filled with anxiety and second-guessing, but Wade remained steady beside her, his faith in her never wavering. Margaret stayed in Circleville, taking a room at the boarding house and slowly beginning to rebuild her relationship with her daughter. They spent long hours talking, working through years of hurt and misunderstanding. Margaret explained how Henry had seemed charming at first, how by the time she realized his true nature, she had felt trapped with no way out. Willa shared her own pain, the helplessness of watching her mother suffer, the rage that had built up over years of abuse. They cried together and slowly began to heal together. The day of the trial arrived cold and gray, matching Willa's nervous mood. She dressed in her best clothes, Margaret helping her fix her hair in a simple but neat style. Wade wore his Sunday suit, looking uncomfortable but determined to be there for her. The courtroom was intimidating, filled with curious townspeople and stern-faced legal officials. Willa sat at the defense table between Fletcher and Wade, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The prosecutor presented the basic facts, making it sound cold and calculated, a daughter who murdered her stepfather in his own home. Willa felt her stomach churn with each word. Then Fletcher stood to present their defense, and the narrative shifted. He painted a picture of years of abuse, of a terrified woman and her daughter trapped in a dangerous situation, of a final confrontation that ended in tragedy but saved a life. He called Margaret to the stand, and she testified with quiet dignity about Henry's violence, about the beating he had been giving her that night, about watching Willa pick up the gun to make it stop. "My daughter saved my life," Margaret said firmly, looking directly at the jury. "If she had not acted, I would not be sitting here today. What she did was not murder. It was an act of desperate courage by a young woman who had endured too much for too long." Wade testified next, speaking about Willa's character, her work ethic, and her kindness toward the horses and people in Circleville. Others from town followed, each adding their voices to the chorus of support. Willa sat in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the realization that these people, this community, believed in her innocence. When it was Willa's turn to take the stand, she was shaking so badly that Wade gave her hand a reassuring squeeze before she stood. Fletcher guided her through her testimony gently, letting her tell the story in her own words. She did not hide from the truth, did not try to make herself sound more heroic than she felt. She simply explained what had happened, her voice breaking when she described the moment the gun went off, the terrible reality of what she had done. "I did not mean to kill him," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I just wanted him to stop hurting my mother. But when he fell, when I saw the blood, part of me was relieved. And that makes me a terrible person, does it not? To feel relief at someone's death." "No," Fletcher said gently. "It makes you human. It makes you someone who had been living in fear for years, who finally saw that fear end. That does not make you a murderer, Miss Laurent. That makes you a survivor." The prosecutor tried to paint her flight as evidence of guilt, but Fletcher countered by explaining the emotional trauma and fear that had driven her to run. By the time closing arguments finished, Willa felt wrung out and exhausted, uncertain which way the verdict would fall. The jury deliberated for 4 hours that felt like 4 years. Willa sat with Wade and her mother in a small waiting room, unable to eat or drink or focus on anything except the clock ticking away the minutes. Wade held her hand the entire time, his thumb tracing soothing circles on her palm. When they were finally called back into the courtroom, Willa's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She stood as the judge asked the jury foreman for their verdict, Wade rising beside her in a show of silent support. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Willa Laurent, not guilty by reason of self-defense." The words took a moment to penetrate Willa's consciousness. Not guilty. She was not guilty. A sob burst from her throat, and then Wade was pulling her into his arms, holding her as she cried tears of overwhelming relief. Her mother was there too, wrapping them both in a fierce embrace, all three of them crying and laughing at the same time. "It is over," Wade whispered into her hair. "It is finally over, my love. You are free, free." The word felt foreign and wonderful. Willa was free to stay in Circleville, free to build a life without looking over her shoulder, free to love Wade without secrets between them. The weight she had been carrying for months finally lifted, and she could breathe fully for the first time since that terrible night in Nevada. After the trial, life in Circleville settled into a new, better rhythm. Margaret decided to stay, finding work as a seamstress and renting a small house on the edge of town. She and Willa spent time together regularly, rebuilding their bond and creating new, happier memories to replace the painful ones. Wade and Willa's relationship deepened with each passing day. No longer burdened by secrets, Willa could finally open her heart completely, and what she found there was a love that felt solid and real and true. Wade courted her properly now, taking her on picnics and walks, bringing her flowers and stealing kisses when they thought no one was looking. On a cold December evening, as they walked back from the boarding house after dinner, Wade stopped under a sky full of stars and took both her hands in his. "Willa Laurent, I have loved you from almost the moment I met you, even when you were determined to keep me at a distance. I love your strength and your vulnerability, your fierce heart and your gentle hands. I love the way you talk to the horses and the way you laugh when you think no one is listening. I want to spend the rest of my life loving you if you will have me. Will you marry me?" Willa's eyes filled with happy tears as she looked at this man who had saved her in every way that mattered. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, I will marry you, Wade Brennan. I love you more than I ever thought possible." Wade slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, and Willa was kissing him back, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope into that moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and grinning, Willa felt like her heart might explode with happiness. They were married in the spring of 1884, in the small church in Circleville, with the whole town in attendance. Margaret cried happy tears throughout the ceremony, and the boarding house owner provided a magnificent cake for the celebration afterward. Willa wore a simple white dress that Margaret had sewn for her, and Wade could not stop staring at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "I love you, Mrs. Brennan," he whispered as they danced their first dance as husband and wife. "I love you too," Willa replied, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you for giving me another chance." "Thank you for taking it," Wade said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for trusting me, for staying, for building this life with me." They moved into a small house behind the stable, and Willa continued to work alongside Wade, their partnership in business as strong as their partnership in marriage. The stable prospered under their joint management, and within a year, they were able to expand, adding more stalls and beginning the breeding program Wade had always dreamed of. In the autumn of 1885, Willa discovered she was expecting their first child. Wade was overjoyed, immediately becoming protective and fussing over her until she laughingly told him she was pregnant, not made of glass. Margaret was equally thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother, already planning all the things she would sew for the baby. Their son was born in May of 1886, a healthy boy with Wade's blue eyes and Willa's dark hair. They named him William, after Wade's father, and Willa fell instantly and completely in love. Holding her son in her arms, she marveled at how much her life had changed in 3 years. She had gone from running scared and alone to being surrounded by love, with a husband who adored her, a mother she had reconciled with, and now a child of her own. "He is perfect," Wade whispered, gazing down at his son with wonder. "You are perfect. I am the luckiest man alive." Willa leaned into his embrace, her heart full to bursting. "I never thought I would have this. I never thought I deserved this kind of happiness." "Everyone deserves happiness," Wade said softly, echoing the words he had spoken that first day in the stable. "Everyone deserves another chance. I am just glad you took yours." Life continued its gentle rhythm in Circleville. William grew into a bright, energetic toddler who loved the horses as much as his parents did. Margaret doted on her grandson, spending hours playing with him and telling him stories. The stable business continued to thrive, and Wade and Willa became respected members of the community, known for their honesty, hard work, and kind hearts. In 1889, their daughter was born, a tiny girl they named Grace, after the Grace Willa felt she had been shown when Wade entered her life. Grace had her mother's green eyes and her father's easy smile, and from her first breath, she had both her parents wrapped around her tiny finger. "Our family is complete," Willa said one evening, watching Wade play with both children in the yard behind their house. William was chasing a ball while Wade held baby Grace in his arms, pointing out the horses in the nearby pasture. "Is it?" Wade asked with a mischievous grin. "I was thinking maybe we could manage 3 or 4 more." Willa laughed and swatted his arm. "2 is plenty for now, thank you. Maybe we can discuss more children later." Margaret came to visit most days, her presence a constant source of love and support. She had aged gracefully, the lines of pain and fear that had marked her face in Nevada replaced by lines of laughter and contentment. She had found peace in Circleville, just as Willa had, and watching her mother thrive brought Willa immense joy. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. William grew into a responsible young man who shared his father's love of horses and business sense. Grace became a skilled rider and had a gentle way with animals that reminded everyone of her mother. The stable expanded further, gaining a reputation throughout Utah for quality horses and fair dealing. In 1895, Wade and Willa added a 3rd child to their family, another son they named James. His arrival brought fresh energy to the household, and both William and Grace doted on their baby brother. Margaret, now a sprightly grandmother in her 50s, delighted in having 3 grandchildren to spoil. One evening in the summer of 1896, as Willa and Wade sat on their porch watching the sun set over the Utah landscape, Wade took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You ever think about that day you rode into town?" he asked. "About how different things could have been?" Willa nodded, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I think about it often. I think about how close I came to just passing through, how I almost did not accept your offer of work. I think about how different my life would be now if I had kept running." "I thank God every day that you stayed," Wade said quietly. "That you trusted me enough to take a chance. You have made me happier than I ever imagined possible, Willa. You and our children, this life we have built together, it is everything I ever wanted." "You saved me," Willa said softly. "You saw past the fear and the guilt and the pain, and you offered me something I thought I had lost forever. You offered me hope. You gave me another chance when I did not think I deserved one." "Everyone deserves another chance," Wade said, repeating the words that had become something of a mantra between them over the years. "And I am endlessly grateful you took yours." Willa lifted her head to kiss him, slow and sweet, a kiss filled with 13 years of love and partnership and shared joys. When they pulled apart, she smiled at him, this man who had become her whole world. "So am I," she whispered. "So am I." Inside the house, they could hear their children's laughter, could smell the dinner Margaret was helping prepare, could feel the warmth of home surrounding them. Willa thought back to that desperate, guilty girl who had stumbled into Circleville so many years ago, and she barely recognized her. That girl had been running from her past, convinced she did not deserve kindness or love or a future worth living. But Wade had shown her differently. He had shown her that redemption was possible, that love could heal the deepest wounds, and that second chances were worth taking. He had given her a home, a family, and a life filled with more happiness than she had ever dreamed possible. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Willa said a silent prayer of gratitude for that hot July day in 1883, when she had ridden into a small Utah town with nothing but guilt and desperation. She thanked God for the cowboy with kind blue eyes who had looked at a broken stranger and seen someone worth saving. She thanked him for the love that had bloomed between them, strong enough to weather any storm. Margaret called them in for supper, and Wade stood, pulling Willa up beside him. They walked into their house hand in hand, surrounded by the love and laughter of their family, and Willa knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The past would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her. She was no longer the frightened girl who had pulled a trigger in desperate defense. She was Willa Brennan, wife, mother, businesswoman, and beloved member of the Circleville community. She was proof that people could change, could heal, could build beautiful lives from the ashes of tragedy. And it had all started with a cowboy who believed that everyone deserved another chance, and a scared young woman who finally found the courage to take hers. Their love story was one of redemption and healing, of second chances and hard-won happiness, and it would continue for many more years to come, a testament to the transformative power of compassion, forgiveness, and true love.